You are listening to Mining Stock Education, where you'll learn from the top leaders in the natural resource sector and uncover quality mining investment opportunities.
The Uranium Bulls of the world will not tell you this, and I'll tell you this right up front. Trust me, man, there's no shortage of uranium in the world. You could get a good run here, and I'm selling into that run. I can tell you that for sure. I'll be selling into it because long term, I'm a believer that there's plenty of uranium out there, and probably at about, let's say, $75, you could make you could get a lot of production at $75. There's supply in time that's going to be hitting this market. So if we do get a little bit carried away here with a speculative frenzy, not unlike the cobalt market, not unlike some of the others, take my lead and just be right behind me and selling into this thing, and we'll make a bit of money. And if it doesn't happen, I think I'll still make some money with NexGen on a more conservative fashion as they just gradually move towards production.
Thanks for tuning in to Mining Stock Education again. I'm your host, Bill Powers, and joining me is a returning guest, Warren Irwin of Rossau Asset Management. Warren's been featured on the show going back to my initial interview with him about his experience with the Bre-X scandal in the late 1990s. That was about 5 years ago. And that was one of my first viral posts on this podcast, Warren, that was very educational, that people loved. But you're also into investing in uranium. And in fact, when I bought my first uranium stock in 2016, one of the catalysts was listening to you on two different shows. I believe it was Palisade Radio as well as CEO.ca. And you were talking about a little 60-cent stock called NexGen, which has in the last year hit $8. I think it's at $6 Canadian today. But I asked you to come on so you could share with us your updated views on uranium as well as NexGen and what you see going on in the uranium market. So thank you for joining me again, Warren.
Well, it's always great to be on your show, Bill, and thanks for having me. Yeah, the interesting thing going on these days, there certainly is a big push by a lot of marketers to get the uranium narrative out there and start pumping uranium. So I've been through this before a few times. I made a ton of money last uranium cycle and most of my money was made with extract uranium. It was a Namibian situation we sold to the Chinese, and I think the Chinese are still struggling with it, but I believe their costs are somewhere in the neighborhood of $70 a pound, but they're still producing it because they need the uranium. But so we sold that to the Chinese back then. And then about 7 years ago, I was made aware of a situation in northern Saskatchewan called NexGen. So I jumped on a plane and I went to visit. I was one of the first people on site, and I acquired over a 10% position in it. And I was the largest shareholder for a while until they started getting so big that I just can't have NexGen 100% of my fund. So I had to gradually sell down over time, and it's been a raging success with a multiple billion-dollar market cap now. And so why do your listeners want to listen to me? Possibly because they can learn from my mistakes. And but on a positive note, I think I probably made more money I could say for sure that I made more money in uranium in the last 6 years than anybody I know, because I think we made just under 100 million on NexGen and counting. So that's a pretty big number, and I don't know of anybody else who's made that kind of dough. Maybe some guy who owns some piece of a junior, but even 100 million, it's a good chunk of dough in the uranium space to make. So, anyways, I made a bunch of money in it, and I've learned a lot of lessons over the last 7 years since I've been involved in it. I'd love to share some of those lessons so that your listeners are perhaps in this coming next uranium cycle a little bit sharper, and they can learn from my mistakes and make even more money. And better yet, if they make it, possibly keep more of it when the market inevitably collapses.
On that note, Warren, could you talk about whether you see a repeat of the parabolic rise? So, for example, there's a lot of expectation on uranium Twitter that I've seen that we're going to see a spike to at least $200 a pound and a sustained price above $150 per pound. Do you agree with that?
Well, it all depends. Or maybe that question is best answered, I think, in me just giving you a sense of how I see the market, because it's not an easy answer to that one. And I've learned a lot, like I said, over the last 7 years. And in this latest uranium market, not to mention the previous uranium market, which was, 10, 12, 15 years ago. So I've been following uranium a fair amount. I'm a huge uranium fan. And I think what's happened here is over time, the whole basis of this whole new uranium talk is a result of people have finally figured out I kind of figured out years and years ago that we can't power the world on wind and solar. It's impossible. You can't tell your workers at the BMW factory in Germany, well, take the day off today because there's no wind and the sunlight's not enough to power our plant. So, or if it's a rainy day, there's no sun and there's no wind, so we can't go to work today. Like, that's just not going to happen. And, we've dammed up all the rivers, which is obviously a good source of non-CO2 generating baseload power. But uranium is the only way. Uranium and hence nuclear power is the only way to go. And I have some friends who work in the uranium industry, specializing in SMR, small modular reactors. And frankly, the things they're telling me, if they're to be believed, are pretty amazing, where they've got like new the economics of a nuclear reactor is that it's mainly the cost of producing power is mainly in the capital cost. Whereas this is the bull case for uranium. The people are saying, well, uranium costs are about 5% of the op costs of producing electricity. So the big utilities who are running these nuclear power plants are price inelastic with respect to whether it's $75 a pound or $150 a pound. It really doesn't matter. The key there is their capital costs. So with these SMRs, what they're doing is they're reducing the capital cost of nuclear reactors by standardizing. And reactors around the world, they're just frankly not standardized. So if you could standardize and reduce the capital, so when you build a part, you're building the part for 100 reactors, not just a custom part for one reactor. So that's the essence of it. And if you compare it to, let's say, a natural gas powered generating facility, like just under 100% of the cost of the electricity is the input cost, whether it be the gas. In the case of coal, the same story, right? So it's a very unique economics in the nuclear space. And I remember meeting with, I ran into, who's that character? The guy who developed the internet.
Former vice president, Al Gore?
Yeah. Al Gore. Yeah, I ran into Al Gore at a TED conference in Vancouver. And the guy, I look at him as a bit of a lunatic, but he just finished a big speech about renewables. And first of all, I hate the name renewables because I think it's the stupidest name in the world, because nothing's really that renewable.
It's more like replaceables, though, with how often you have to replace them, though, right?
Yeah, they're replaceable, not renewable. So I remember having a short conversation. I caught him after one of his speeches and said, "So Al, where does nuclear fit into this whole green energy and the global warming thing?" And he looked at me as if I had three heads, right? Like, and even today, the lunatics over at Greenpeace are still anti-nuclear, right? So I have some theories as to why they're anti-nuclear. They've been anti-nuclear since the 70s, and they really haven't smartened up at all and learned that there are better ways to generate power. And thank you, Greenpeace, for 50 years of burning coal instead of having nuclear power, because they were instrumental in shutting down the biggest nuclear power build out in the 70s, certainly in the US, right? And when 3 Mile Island happened, that sort of killed the nuclear power build out in the US for at least half century. So we've been burning coal since then. So here we are today. We're looking at, we basically need, reliable base load. It's been proven around the world, whether it be in most recently in Germany. And I'd advise all your listeners to stay away from Germany this winter. It might be a little chilly there. And hopefully too many Germans don't freeze this winter, but they're all learning the lessons of relying on, wind. And I think they spent $1 trillion on solar. So it's proven that, the politicians haven't gotten it right. And it's not a political, you need to use common sense here. And in England too, last fall, you may recall, they didn't have any wind. So there's electrical shortages. And, you remember the Texans, was it last winter or the winter before, they had a bit of a cold spell when all their fantasy, wind and solar didn't work for them. So there's stories they're starting to pile up pretty hard. And this coming winter, sadly, I do believe there will be a significant chance that there are some people dying in Germany as a result of the cold, and because these are the clowns that shut half their reactors and wanted to shut them all, and somehow wanted to trust an unsustainable source like Russian natural gas and solar and wind. And Germany is not a particularly sunny place, so it's pretty nutty what's been going on. And these politicians jump on the bandwagon, and there's a completely ignorant populace out there that are all concerned about saving the planet. So a lot of stupid things are happening and have happened and continue to happen. But nuclear, I think people have finally figured it out. It's the only way to generate non-CO2 baseload. So that's the basis there. I figured this out, many, many years ago, just doing the mathematics behind how much energy the world will need. We need fission, and possibly in the future we'll need fusion with the thorium reactors and stuff like that. But that's in the future. Today, the leading edge seems to be small modular reactors, and a number of them are fail-safe in that they're molten salt reactors where they already have a liquefied fuel, so you can't really have a meltdown. So,
and that could put a cap on the uranium price. Is that where you're leading to with the implementation of these small modular reactors?
A cap, an upwards cap, you mean?
An upwards cap, if the uranium price becomes more elastic versus how it's inelastic right now.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think the other thesis here, the uranium bulls of the world will not tell you this, and I'll tell you this right up front. Trust me, man. There's no shortage of uranium in the world. I know of one country. I tried to go in and do a uranium deal with them. It didn't work out because I was asked for too many bribes. But trust me, they have hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds of uranium. That are kind of there. And you take a look at a country like Brazil. I was looking at some uranium stuff there, but you're not allowed to mine it as individual company. So there's lots of uranium in Brazil. There's uranium in Africa. There's uranium everywhere. And there's uranium in seawater. So there's lots and lots of uranium. These people who are running around panicking right now, saying there's a massive shortfall, are kind of overreacting. The biggest case they use is there's about, just to get some of the mathematical metrics out of the way, there's about 450 operating nuclear reactors right now. Let's say 440 to 450 kind of range. Okay, so that's the basis there. So when people say, well, they've just reopened another nuclear power plant in, wherever, okay? And that you just go, okay, that's 1 over 450, okay? So that'll be 1 450th impact. Well, that's, okay, that doesn't have any impact on demand. And on the demand side too, even if we had a massive nuclear renaissance today, frankly, it just takes a while for nuclear power plants to be designed, built, permitted. Designed, permitted, and built. China is cranking them out pretty quickly. I believe there's about 50 under construction there, so that could have a meaningful impact over quite a number of years. But that's a 10% increase. But if you split it over, maybe 10 years or 5 years or whatever the number is, you just take 10% divided by 5 years roughly, and you get a 2% increase in demand. And the big bull case a lot of people are putting out in front of everyone right now is there's 180 million pounds consumed every year, roughly. Okay, don't hold me to that number. And there's roughly about 135, 130, somewhere in there, produced. So there's about a 40 to 50 million pound a year shortfall. And all the bulls are saying, well, everybody's finally realizing there's a uranium renaissance. There's a 50 million or 40 to 50 million pound shortfall. It's amazing. We gotta jump on it. And that's sort of the narrative I bought 5 or 6 years ago when I did that Palisade piece about uranium, because it made a ton of sense to me. You're looking at massive shortfalls in uranium, and the only concern there, of course, is I had a friend of mine who was in the uranium business. Is Warren there's no shortage of uranium out there. I know where there's 1 billion pounds. There's 1 billion pounds of uranium floating around, and there's no shortage of it. These guys saying there's a big shortfall are very mistaken. The secondary supply is there, and it'll be there for a very long time. So taking a look back at my friend who told me this probably 6 or 7 years ago, 7 years at let's say a 50 million pound a year shortfall, he was exactly right. The world found 350 million pounds of uranium to make up that shortfall. And it was made up, right? And today, it's being made up today. And the new purveyors of promotion in the uranium space, the biggest promoter right now is the Sprott Uranium Trust, right? I think they've acquired in the spot market almost just under 60 million pounds. And I think Yellow Cake is a little bit smaller. Were they around 20 million pounds? I forget the exact number. So if you take those two together, not only in the last 7 years has been roughly 350 million pounds supplied to the market from existing stockpiles of uranium, then you'd have Sprott and Yellow Cake step up and buy another 80 million pounds. So that's like 430 million pounds of uranium just appeared out of nowhere and satisfied all the demand, and nobody freaked out and nobody got short. Nobody was short the price of uranium. Nobody was short on uranium. So that's an important thing. And it was a pretty wise old guy who told me that thing. He said, Warren, don't get too excited about uranium. There's lots of uranium out there. They'll make up the shortfall, no problem whatsoever. Okay, so meanwhile, what's happened is over the past number of years, when I was an owner of NexGen, I still am an owner of NexGen, but just not as much as I used to own. The price of uranium dropped to a low of around $17-18, right? You recall that, and here we are today. We're just under 50 at around $48. So, in any other market I've been involved in, if the price of the underlying commodity almost triples, you're going to get such a massive run in the underlying equities that it would be amazing. But here we are. This is reality. Uranium went from $18 to just under 50, which is almost a triple, or 2.5 times. And trust me, I haven't seen the type of rally in the underlying companies that you would normally see. Like if somebody told you, Bill, that we're going to run gold from 1,700 to 5,500, do you think that would move some of the gold juniors a little bit? I would think it would, and it would move them like in a factor of 10, and you'd see massive.
But Warren, hasn't some of them moved? I'm trying to look here. I remember owning Energy Fuels at like $1.50, and today, isn't it a multi-dollar share price? As an example,
yeah. Where's it?
Or even NexGen from 60 cents to $8, right? And part of that was the discovery too, though, right?
Part of it, yeah. Part of it, all of it was. Like, but
wasn't it like 250 before uranium really took off? I'm trying to remember here.
Oh, it's tough. It's tough to say anything specifically related to your NexGen, because it kind of rallied from 60 cents to $4, then back down to $2, and back up to I've been up and down, and and the big buying opportunity was in early 2020 when they had the big COVID meltdown, and you could have picked it up for 80 cents, and then 9 months later it's trading at $8, right? You got a 10, you're just in that move. But what I'm trying to get across, Bill, on this point is that if I had a junior gold company trading at $1 and gold tripled in value, I'm pretty sure that junior would be trading at $10, if you get my drift, right? And so everything should have gone up $10. And if, let's say, even the case of NexGen, if NexGen was trading at $2.50 or $3 around that time, well, it should be at $30 today. If you get my drift, just roughly.
So you're saying the equities are not telegraphing $200 per pound uranium. Would that be another way of kind of phrasing what you're describing?
No, the best way to describe it is the price of uranium tripled off the bottom, let's say, and stocks really, they have not done what I would have thought they would have done if that was the case. If any other for instance, if copper tripled from $3.50 to over $10 a pound, you'd see a much bigger run in the equities. So that's another observation. You could check all the numbers out and yourself and just see how little the uranium equities have moved with almost a triple in the price of uranium. Okay, so here we are today. That's just a little bit of background. So where we are today is we have the guys at Sprott Uranium Trust. They are, promoting the hell out of uranium, saying we've cleaned up the spot market. We're ready to go. This market's getting tighter every day. Finally, nuclear energy is considered a realistic alternative, not like it was perhaps 5 or 10 years ago. And I would agree with them on that. So we have a lot of people who are very much incentivized to create the bull case for uranium. And the only problem, of course, on the demand side, you need to get some pretty big numbers of reactors to get any significant increase in demand for uranium. So there you have it. So it's not as if you could triple the number of reactors over the next 10 years. That's not going to happen. So we're going to get, regardless of what happens to the price of uranium, we're going to be ticking higher every year on the demand front for uranium, right? That's really good. So, and then at some point in the future here, and the other bull case too for uranium people are talking about is how they're starting to overfeed now, right? Because there's the enrichment side of things is a little bit capacity constrained, so they're putting in more UF6 to get the enriched uranium, and that's going to lead to, I've heard some people say 10 million pounds plus in terms of excess demand for uranium. So you've got uranium demand ticking away. You've got people claiming with respect to the enrichment, we'll need a little bit more because we're overfeeding in the enrichment cycle. So, okay, those are all well and good. And Sprott's telling people, well, we've cleaned up the spot market. There's no more supply, and and eventually this 50 million pounds a year deficit is going to bite us. So that's really the key, right? Now, the biggest risk with uranium for an investor is what'll happen here is the uranium market is a reasonably small market overall. And, you've heard it like $30 to $40 billion market cap for all the uranium companies out there. So what you could have happen here, and I think this may have happened the last big cycle when you had the big spike, was a big player with lots and lots of money. Let's say I was running a big hedge fund, a $20 billion hedge fund in the US, and I said, I'm going to take a $2 billion punt on uranium. And if you get enough guys doing that, you're going to have a lot of money jumping into the cycle. And that's the biggest thing which would really drive this cycle. Because what they'll do is, if they're playing it smart, what they'll do is they'll step into the market and they'll start picking up all the equities first. And you'll look at, as an investor, if you're looking for, well, when is this market really going to move? My sense is, the first sense you're going to get is you're going to say, gee, this is weird. Cameco's up 10% today and the price of uranium hasn't moved. And NexGen's up 10%. And those are probably the two benchmarks in the Western world. And of course, Kazatomprom is one to watch too. So between those three, you'll start noticing the equities creep up as the hedge funds move into the equities, and then they'll try and ramp. Once they have their equity positions, they'll throw a few $1 billion at Sprott Uranium Trust, and we'll see those guys go into the market, clean up the spot market, maybe run the spot market to $75, $80, who knows? And then these equities, ideally for them, they'll hope they'll appreciate in value, and people won't say, well, we figured this game out. You guys are just manipulating the short-term price of uranium. It's not going to impact the long-term price of uranium. So we're not going to play this game. But that's really, I think, what's trying to happen right now. There's enough people on enough podcasts that are out there pumping the uranium story, uranium, go. And if they're able to excite enough people with enough money, they could come into this market and really clean up the spot price and really jam the spot price. And as you know, then as soon as you jam the spot price from 50 to 75, then you'll have a whole bunch of Me Too players jumping in, thinking that they've got a bit of a run on your hands, and they'll run it. And then you'll have a uranium market. How long it lasts, who knows? And but that's just one scenario. That's a scenario I think a lot of people are hoping for, because a lot of the pundits out there that are speaking about uranium, they're loaded up with a lot of these junky little uranium companies, and they want somebody to sell them to at a much higher price. And you just have to be careful you're not the person buying those junk uranium companies at a higher price just before the big hedge funds out of the U.S. stop buying spot uranium, or they decide to start unloading their Cameco, NexGen, and Kazatomprom positions on you. So that's the thing I would be a little careful about. Now, I still own some uranium exposure, and the way I like to play it is a little bit more conservative than that. I own NexGen, which is, I think, a pretty conservative way to play it, because they're putting an extraordinary mine into production, the best uranium property in the world. It'll be the benchmark. I think that everybody matches themselves off against. So my view is, if the price of uranium goes up, great. Price of uranium stays the same, that's fine. I'll still make money. If it goes down a little bit, I'll still make a bunch of money, because they're going through the process of permitting and building this mine. And once it gets into production, there'll be a massive bump in valuation. So I'm going to make money, I think, regardless of whether this inevitable uranium boom happens or not. And if it does happen, NexGen will be a go-to name, and you can make a lot of money in NexGen. Then I have a couple crappy names in the uranium space, a little bit more speculative. The stuff they own may not be economic at the present time, but in a good go-go uranium market, these are the ones that will really, really fly. So I've got those on my books, and for a little bit of fun, a little bit of octane. And if it does happen, the big prognostications of a big run in the uranium price as more money floods into the market, I'm going to be selling them into the market and saying thank you very much, and I'm on to something else. So that's sort of my assessment of kind of where we're at right now. People are trying to move this uranium market. They're trying to, I'm not saying corner it, but it can be cornered more so than any other. This is not copper, right? This is a very small commodity. And if you get enough billions of dollars thrown into the Sprott Uranium Trust, or people that just decide to buy the uranium on their own because they're big enough, you could really get some big moves in this, and you get a lot of excitement and hype. But the underlying situation really is you can't build reactors super fast. So on the demand side, there'll be constant growth, which is great. And over time, with a high price of uranium, more and more people will get out there looking. Mines which right now are not economic will all of a sudden be economic, and they'll gradually get into production. So that's a self-solving situation over time. But
Warren, I have so many thoughts going through my head. I can hear your objections as you're talking. And I know this interview will be a downer for some listeners, because you had that famous quote from the Palisade interview about expecting a rip your face off uranium rally. Yeah. So this is obviously a different tone. But with one of the, I guess, objections I can hear is, well, Warren just shared that he sold $100 million, or he made $100 million profit. So if his profit's behind him, maybe that has affected his less than bullish or not ultra bullish outlook moving forward. What would be your response to that? And the second thing is, basically, does your macro view on what's happening in uranium, does it always have to lead to NexGen is the best stock to buy? That's another criticism in a different form that I've seen.
Yeah, okay. On the first one is my call on the rip your face off uranium rally. It wasn't exactly rip your face off your uranium rally, but I think my recollection was it was pretty darn low in price, and it's gone up double or whatever. So it wasn't a rip your face off uranium rally. It was a uranium rally, reason a little lamer than a rip your face off one. So yeah, you can nail me on that one. And it was not as exciting as I had hoped. And part of the reason I think is because of what my friend cautioned me of, and I disregarded the caution, of course, when he said, Warren, there's 1 billion pounds of uranium out there. There's no shortage of uranium. They'll always make up that 50 million pounds shortfall. Don't you worry about that. And then he proceeded to tell me about, Warren, hey, do you want to help finance me buying 30 million pounds of uranium? I know of one seller who's got it sitting out in the desert in a shed. And so, if there are these little pockets of uranium all around the world and that are just gradually, hitting the market over time, right? So yeah, he was right with that one. He was a very, very sharp guy. And so here we are today. We've got, like I said, we still have that shortfall. And a lot of people are getting excited about uranium, but the demand side, frankly, the demand side cannot hit super duper hard because it just takes so long to build these reactors. And then people will say the overfeeding will solve some of that. But then you have then on the other side too, you're going, well look at the production numbers NexGen's expecting. Well, NexGen's going to be cranking out 30 million pounds a year, man. That's a lot of uranium. Well, you'd better hope that Cigar Lake, Cameco's Cigar Lake or McArthur River start tailing off their production profile by the end of the decade when NexGen gets into production. So there's a lot of moving parts. So I'm definitely not quite as bullish as it was before, but hey, that doesn't stop this market from being manipulated and just rocketing. And but that's the important thing to remember is on a fundamental basis, it's the fundamentals are pretty good for uranium and good long term, I think. But it does lead itself to manipulation over the short term if enough people jump on it and it's flavor of the day. We saw that exact same thing happen. Remember, cobalt was the flavor of the day, and they tripled the price of cobalt, and
it was the flavor of the day for like 6 months, or something like that.
That's exactly right. And if you had me on your show and you said, Warren, what about cobalt? What do you think of cobalt? And I would have said, long term, I think cobalt is not the place to be, and the reason is the majority of cobalt is being sourced from the Congo. In a lot of instances, the byproduct of the other mining activities there, namely copper. And will the world base its entire electrification on one country, which is, it's kind of on the edge there, right? Like Congo, I've been there, and it's I know a lot of people there. So Congo is a pretty sketchy country, and will the world rely on Congo for the electrification? And I go, absolutely not. And any bull cobalt guy who was coming to me and getting all excited about cobalt was going, okay, I know you're excited. A bunch of hedge funds in the US did the exact same thing they did with uranium, like the last cycle. They all jumped into one commodity and said, hey kids, look at we just ran the price up triple. Well, then in the case of cobalt, I don't think anybody jumped onto that bandwagon to continue the hype. And I'm not sure to what extent those hedge funds managed to get off their position. But as I said to any cobalt bull, I said, okay, if you don't think every single engineer in the entire world is trying to engineer cobalt out of the next generation batteries, you'd be mistaken, right? So long term, it's ridiculous. And people out looking for cobalt, they come to me for money all the time and go, I'm not going to give you money. I said, by the time you guys find cobalt, get it permitted and build a cobalt mine, then get your original capital back, cobalt will be engineered out of batteries. So they'll be using something way, way cheaper. And so, again, my friends, I didn't, it happens again and again in some of these markets. I remember people coming to me about weed stocks, right? And I did not participate in any weed stocks, really. People, hey Warren, they legalized weed in Canada. Let's jump on the board. They're going to make tons of money, and all these growers are. I said, no. I said, listen, I come from a farming family, and there's no money in farming, and there's going to be no money in farming weed either. And sure enough, that that didn't stop them from speculating. They ramped up the weed companies like crazy, and people made tons and tons of money. I know guys who made hundreds of millions of dollars in the weed stocks, but then it all comes crashing down when people figured out in the end, nobody makes money from farming. So with cobalt, I didn't participate in that ridiculous rally because I knew in the end where it was going to end up. I didn't participate in his ridiculousness with weed because I knew where it was going to end up, and ended up exactly where I expected it to be, although I did not participate in some of the hugely profitable opportunities here. And in uranium, if I was to make a prediction, we'll find enough uranium to satisfy the demand. It'll just take some time. But uranium, the market is at risk of having a spike, short-term spike that people will be trading off of for sure. And
so you're cautioning people, be ready to jump the ship when you see the spike. Would that be one of the takeaways for the average investor?
Well, for the average investor, there's one lesson I've learned, which is whenever you think you're smart, and you think, boy, this is great. Making money's easy. Then you sell, right? So, yeah, so that's probably not a bad time to sell. So how I'm playing is going, I'm agnostic here. Let's see, I wish Sprott in the crowd, the Uranium Bull crowd, all the best. I wish them all the best to ramp up the price of uranium and get the hype going and have a repeat of the last cycle. I wish them all well, because what I'll be doing, I'll be selling my NexGen into that rally, and I'll be sending all my other junky uranium stocks into that rally. Meanwhile, if it doesn't happen, I own some NexGen, and it's going to just gradually tick higher over the next few years as they go into production. And so that's sort of the way I'm playing it. Your listeners may want to play it more aggressively than that. I don't think you play it much more conservatively than the way I'm playing it. But I just want to share some of those stories with your listeners so when they hear this hype, just take it with a grain of salt, and just you hope these guys. It's always fun to have a market just ramp, and it's always fun to have some excitement in a market, and I hope these guys are able to create it. But as soon as they create, I'll tell you, I bet I'll be looking for the exit, because long term, the reality is growth and demand will be gradual over time. There's going to be lots and lots of uranium out there, especially if they took uranium to $100. Like, it doesn't need to be the 150 you're talking about. You take uranium to $100. You know how many uranium mines will be economic at those levels? There'll be lots. And do you know how much uranium sitting in stockpiles in some warehouse in the middle of the African desert will be hitting the market at $100 uranium? It'll be coming back at us, right? It's no different than when they took gold to 800 in the early 80s. Like, people were pulling gold out of their teeth and shipping it in. Like, we were finding gold pretty much everywhere, and they were melting it down and shipping it into the market like crazy. So, but there are a lot of mines that will be economic at $7,500 uranium that will come into production to satisfy long-term needs. So, if if I was speaking with any government official or any group running reactors, I'd say, we might get a short-term pop here on speculative frenzy with a bunch of hedge funds thinking they can make a bunch of money in the uranium space, but long-term, don't worry, we'll find all the uranium you need, because there's lots of uranium out there, and we'll just as nuclear energy becomes more acceptable, I think mining uranium will become more acceptable. Also, you're seeing right now, like, there's limitations in Brazil, for instance, I could think of. You saw what happened with Berkeley in Spain, where that, they were telling me, Warren, you got to put money into a company. I said, we got a great project. It looks excellent, but I really just don't see yourselves getting permitted. I don't care what you tell me. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened, right? So, but overall, we as a mining industry are industrious, and trust me, we will find all the uranium the nuclear reactors of the future will need, and we'll find that in a host of different ways, in a host of different places in different countries, and we will satisfy that demand. Meanwhile, there are some people here trying to get a uranium market going, and it'll be a short-term thing, and it'll probably, if they get it going really well, it'll overshoot quite a bit. So,
well, Warren, I can tell you that there's probably going to be some fireworks in the YouTube comments when I publish this, as well as on Uranium Twitter. I think you'll have more than a little discussion about your take here.
Sure. Well, remember, guys, I am a long-term supporter of uranium. I'm an owner of uranium stocks, and I'm a proponent of nuclear energy. I'm all fully supportive. And but I'm just sharing you some of my observations here. And if you decide not to believe them, don't believe them. That's fine. And go and rock and roll in the uranium market. And I just thought I'd share with you some of the things I've come across in my travels, and some numbers that that I use in my analysis. And again, I'm not trying to rain on the parade of these uranium bulls, and I hope they're right, because I'll make a lot of money. Trust me on this one, Bill. I will make a lot of money. I just hope they're able to, not say sucker enough big hedge funds in the U.S. to jump on the bandwagon and ramp this, because it'll be tons of fun, tons of interesting things, and I don't need people to come up to me and say in 2 years' time, "Oh, Warren, you missed the rally in uranium. You're a bear." I said, "I'm not a bear. I'm hopeful." I'm hopeful these guys can do it, but I do know the underlying fundamentals. Also, I just take a little different view of them than some of these guys, and I see uranium projects all the time. There's lots of uranium out there, and in time they could all be put into production. But in the short term, when you get some speculative money hitting the spot market, like they can do with the Sprott Uranium Trust, and perhaps we might get a bit of a break from the 50 million pounds a year being flooded into the spot market by the secondary sources. You could get a good run here, and I'm selling into that run. I can tell you that for sure. I'll be selling into it because long term, I'm a believer that there's plenty of uranium out there, and probably at about, let's say, $75, you could make. You could get a lot of production at $75, and you look at. I haven't looked at NexGen's costs, but NexGen's costs are next to nothing, and Kazatoprom's costs are next to nothing, right? So the margins they'll be making will be insane. And another little interesting point too, where people who are all freaked out about uranium supply. I remember speaking with the head of Kazatoprom at a conference, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but he said, "Oh, Warren, you give me $100 million, we'll crank up production by however many millions of pounds." Like they're ready to rock and roll. They're ready to crank up production if need be. So they're ready to crank up production. You got 30 million pounds of NexGen coming up on stream here, and so there's supply and time that's going to be hitting this market. So if we do get a little bit carried away here with a speculative frenzy, not unlike the cobalt market, not unlike some of the others, take my lead and just be right behind me and selling into this thing, and we'll make a bit of money. And if it doesn't happen, I think I'll still make some money with NexGen on a more conservative fashion as they just gradually move towards production.
Okay, well, Warren, really appreciate you sharing these more of outlier amongst the Uranium Bulls perspective, but thank you for coming on the show today.
All right, Bill, don't burn me too bad, okay?
It'll be the comments. It won't be me.
Well, I just hope it's really, it's always good to hear guys like myself, I think, for I'm not saying it's a contrary position. I'm on the same team, guys. I'm rooting for a rip your face off uranium rally. I'm just trying to throw some other points of view in there, and I'm with you if there is a great uranium rally, and I think they have a shot at pulling this thing off, and I wish everybody well, because I'll benefit too.